Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a roundup from Apple's keynote today back in my hometown of New York City. So, of course, Apple introduced the revamped iPad Pro as well as the revamped MacBook Air and Mac Mini. And this is really a refresh by all means, no question about it. I'm going to start with the iPad Pro, which I think is the most compelling refresh of the three categories. And already from design, you can see this is a departure from previous generations of all iPad, and that's because Apple has moved towards what they, of course, have coined a liquid retina display that allows them to actually have curved edges. And you can see that the actual LCD panel is curved. Not curved in the way that Samsung actually creates a real curve with AMOLED displays, but the fact that we don't have sharp edges at each corner of the display. And also moving away from the forehead and chin design, of course, no home button. This all equates to much less bezel, which is both a good and bad thing. From an aesthetic standpoint, definitely very good looking. You can even see on the side of the iPad Pro now, we're looking more and more like a MacBook Pro than an iPad product. And that's exactly where Apple wants to go. So let's go ahead and click into the stats. Of course, this is powered by the Bionic A12, but in the X capacity, which is supposed to be, of course, faster. You can see the 11-inch version starts at $799. The 12.9-inch version starts at $1,000. These prices aren't anything new, but the extreme reach, how deep they can go inside your pocket, is a new level altogether. And Apple is pitching the iPad Pro as they always have, which is that it can replace your laptop. In fact, the whole pitch from the keynote today was that their iPad Pro is outselling the laptop market. Now, I'm not sure how much validity there is to that. These are, in my opinion, completely content consumption devices, as the majority of tablets outside of the Surface Pro line exist. They do represent content consumption. Of course, Apple would have you believe otherwise, and that's why they've priced the 1 terabyte version at $1,749 US. You heard correctly, more than the cost of most high-end laptops. You're starting at $1,750. Now, again, you can start at 64 gigs. Remember, no expandable storage here. $1,000, of course, $1,150 for 256, and for the 512 gig, $1,350. If you have the nerve to get the Wi-Fi plus cellular option, you're looking at a cool $1,899 US. You heard right. Again, $1,900 in order to get yourself an iPad Pro. And you better believe Apple wants to convince you that this can replace a laptop, because you certainly are spending as much as you would on a high-end laptop. So they need to deliver on that promise, right? Well, of course, the iPad Pro is not a laptop, nor can it be. Can it serve as a suitable in-between for people who don't want to carry around a laptop or a MacBook Pro? Sure it can. But when it gets down to real computing, real video editing, I know they demoed Lightroom with color correction, apps that are there, but that's the whole hindrance of selling a product like this at $1,900 US, is that at the end of the day, you are relying on Apple's iOS ecosystem. You do not have a computer. So this idea that we can sell you something that will replace the laptop, but at the same price as the laptop for you, however, at Apple's cost, you're looking at all of the internal components they're using for their current line of iPhone. So essentially, you're getting an iPhone XS with a 12.9 or 11-inch screen, and at a price that's similar, quite frankly. So it's just, great margins. I have no other way of putting this, and the idea that this is a replacement for a laptop is a joke. Now, there is a silver lining. They have finally given us a Type-C port, which for Apple is almost as incredible as them delivering, wireless charging and an AMOLED display as they did last generation. Congratulations. So there is a caveat, though, to that Type-C port, which is that it's capable of only two things: connecting to cameras, as far as we know right now, as per the keynote, as well as connecting to external monitors, because the whole pitch here is you can use this as a laptop. even though it's not a laptop, which is confusing, and it should be, because, again, the only way they can keep justifying that it can replace a laptop is from the perspective of how much it costs, not what it can do. In fact, even the most, I would say, loyal Apple customer has to admit this cannot replace their MacBook Pro. It certainly can replace their current iPad Pro, no question about that. And you can pick up the type cover for $150. They also revamped the pencil, which I think was a good move, and they copied Microsoft in that now it magnetically attaches and charges itself, so that's cute. But beyond that, I really don't have a lot to tell you. I mean, this whole idea of pen input is only foreign to Apple users because they've been living in an Apple bubble. And I'm not being rude or harsh on Apple users. I understand where you're coming from. You want it to be simple. You want a product that's high quality, and you don't want to have to worry about options. Well, Apple has continued to ensure that you won't have to worry because, as we see right here, it's exactly what you're getting. So if you get the Smart Keyboard Folio, they've moved the Pogo ports from last gen to the actual back of the tablet so that it no longer connects here where it actually would sit. And it really acts the same way Samsung's Folio does as well. It's magnetic, whoop-de-doo, nothing new. For those of you wondering, the first-gen pencil is not compatible with the second-gen. Sad to let you know. And yes, you do have to purchase it, just like you would have to purchase the keyboard. So they're following, these are not new things. Now, the 11-inch form factor, $799. By the way, we have no idea how much RAM is in either of these devices, at least as of the keynote. But you could see that, let me change this. The 11-inch display with 1 terabyte, $1,700 if you're going with an LTE option, $1,549 if you're just content with Wi-Fi and a terabyte. But the fact that they could make a tablet so expensive, I mean, this is only Apple, baby. I mean, no one else could turn a tablet that isn't a computer into the pricing of a computer and then make the argument that this does replace a computer, even though I just told you the Type-C port, which is incredibly flexible, the most flexible port type on Earth, 10 gigabit pass-through connection speed capability, you cannot use this for anything other than connecting to something like a camera or a display. And that, to me, already tells you most of what you need. And for DJs that love using the iPad, which Apple loves to always boast about, no headphone jack. So even though you've got a 1.4 pound, 12.9-inch tablet in the larger version of the iPad Pro, you can't connect headphones without a dongle or using Bluetooth, which is not going to be acceptable for any DJ. And I even have an old friend who's a DJ that I guarantee you has already pre-ordered this and has somehow justified that there is no headphone jack. I haven't spoken to him. He doesn't DJ at clubs. He's on air radio, real deal. It's been a while since I've spoken to him, but I'm sure that he's come up with a way to justify it in his own head that there is no headphone jack even on a 1.4 pound tablet, which I'm going to tell you right now is going to get heavy really quickly. Now, what they did essentially here, the truth of the matter is with the design, is that they did exactly what Samsung did with the Note 7 to the Note 8. They just eliminated the forehead and the chin. That's it. They got rid of the home button. I hate to say it, but they copied the idea, and it's not a big deal. I'm glad they did. It's a nice-looking piece of hardware, meaning the iPad Pro, both in the 11 and 12.9-inch size. But the pricing is just simply bonkers, and I gotta call a spade a spade. If you're considering whether or not you should be buying a laptop or an iPad Pro, get the laptop, even if that is the MacBook Pro or Air, because this is just insane. I mean, I will search in my heart for you, but there's nothing I can find to justify. This is a cool piece of tech, don't get me wrong. Apple brought the tablet game to where it is today, but they walked away a little bit too, in that innovation has stopped. This doesn't have an OLED screen. You're not getting that color fidelity or vibrance that you'll get with your iPhone, so don't expect it. And again, when it comes to tech specs, or lack thereof, here we go. You're looking at, the capacities you already know. I still can't get over that 64 gigs is the entry level. It should have been 128. They're charging enough, but this is what it is. And there's the scale. Only 2 colors, by the way. I didn't mention silver and space gray. No surprise there. Incredibly thin at 5.9 millimeters. This is both the 11 and the 12.9. The 1-pounder at the 11-inch, I think, is a great start. But 1.4, as great as that is for a nearly 13-inch display, that's still too heavy in my mind to be realistically held for any period of time. I mean, you're going to need a stand. You're going to need to put it in a case that has a stand. If you're buying their case, fine, a third-party case, whatever it may be. Of course, they tell us there's a microphone here, a speaker on the left, a speaker on the left, speaker on the right. So they've, again, utilized the same engineering that Samsung has with their Tab S4 in order to give you speakers all around town, to enhance the audio performance. I like that they've created a magnetic connector, as you can see right here on the top for the pencil. But again, they have not reinvented anything. The nano SIM tray is also going to be flanked by that magnetic connector, as well as your volume control. Power button is on the bottom right side. So I like what they've done with the redesign. There's no question the old iPad Pro just looked like an enlarged iPad. It had no identity. And here, there is a little bit more identity, and that's because the iPad Pro 3 years later is a success, or at least that's what I'm presuming based on the fact that it took this long for a refresh. If it's not 3 years, it's a little under. You get my drift. And we all saw this coming, anyone who knew anything about the business. This is exactly how Apple first started making, the first iPad, and then the Pro came along because they had no answer to Microsoft's Surface Pro. And they would have you believe that this is a competing product with the Surface Pro, but I will tell you again, this cannot replace a laptop. I had a discussion with someone today, a very good friend of mine. He purchased it. He's not an Apple guy, but he gives respect where it's due, and I understand that. And he purchased the 12.9-inch, purely, or I should say predominantly, for content consumption. He does a little bit of gaming on it, and I understand that. But for the price that they're, asking for, I have no one to blame but the competition. Because while, yes, the Galaxy Tab S4 is out there, and it's a great device with an OLED screen that puts this screen to shame, and anyone who argues otherwise is on Kool-Aid. I'm sorry, but the 10.5-inch Super AMOLED display takes a dump on the 12.9-inch Liquid Retina display, not only in terms of color accuracy, but the actual technology employed. Get what you pay for. I'm going to always say that. It doesn't mean get a piece of crap that's expensive to build. Don't misunderstand me. So I'm not comparing the ecosystems. There's no question that iOS is still beefier than Android, but had this been an Android tablet, I might really be interested because I know I'd be able to connect a lot more peripherals than what Apple's giving me access to. Just as iOS, as a contained platform, gives me, yes, an incredible, the largest number of apps available, but not necessarily the most meaningful. And Google did walk away from the tablet market. They're returning with the Slate. The Slate is overpriced too. Surprise, surprise. This is the world we live in now. But there you have the general specs. They're not impressive. It's all about the A12X. I have no idea. I'm assuming it's just an overclocked version of the A12. I have no reason to believe anything otherwise because they're just calling it a beefed up version of the A12. In addition to that, the camera, 12 megapixels. I mean, I really can't make an argument about the camera, smart HDR for photos, because who on earth is going to walk around and use a 12.9-inch tablet to take pictures? If you are that person, then yes, this is an improvement from the previous generation. If you aren't that person, then this is irrelevant. The 4K at 30 or 60p, full respect for that because it should be there. I mean, the amount you're paying for this, a lot more should be there than just a redesign of the footprint on the screen to bezel ratio. But that is really the bottom line about the iPad Pro. It's all about that screen to bezel ratio and how much they've been able to shrink it. And that's even been a selling point for that good friend that I mentioned earlier. He could not justify getting the 12.9 before because it was just too big, too heavy. This one now makes the grade. And I understand where he's coming from, but I'll see once he actually gets it and spends time with it how much he enjoys holding a nearly 1.5-pound tablet over such a large piece of real estate. And by the way, tablets of this size are not a new thing. In fact, they're an old thing. If you look back to my tablet coverage from the very beginning, from Samsung, Toshiba, they both made tablets in this form factor. And dare I say, near similar resolution. And Samsung actually was using AMOLEDs even way back when with the 12.2. So this is not a game breaker, a game changer, I mean, by any means. It just isn't. For Apple, in terms of the way they design, it is because it's rare that they actually break away from their current design. And they have done that here, and I give them credit for that. But really, I mean, to pretend that this could replace a laptop simply because it costs as much as a laptop is a foolish concept, to say the least. 10 hours of battery life. They're saying 9 hours if you have the cellular version, meaning the LTE enabled. So we didn't get an improvement in battery life. That means they are probably using a very similar battery to the previous generation. Maybe it's slightly larger. Of course, iOS 12, another whoop-de-doo thing because this is expected. And I have to say, if Google had stayed on their tablet game and not walked away from it and focused on Pixelbooks, Chromebooks, excuse me, but the Pixel, I think that we would see more competition here. The reality is the only competing product right now in this space is the Galaxy Tab S4, and that's why it has DeX in order to also have a desktop experience, but not limited to you can only connect a monitor or a camera. It does try to act more like Windows. Now, I know that isn't ideal for many users, especially Apple users. They're not interested in something that's going to behave like a Windows machine. And I totally get it. You don't use Windows. Why would you want it? But I could never recommend something like this to someone who needs a computer, regardless of preference of operating system, simply because of the pricing when you could pick up a Surface Pro 6 at a very comparable price point, but with actual computer internals. And with a display that I would argue is just as good, even if it's slightly smaller or slightly larger, depending on whether you're looking at the 11-inch or 12.9-inch iPad Pro. So while this sounds like a competing model for the Surface Pro 6, it in no way is. And of course, in defense of Apple, the Surface Pro 6 isn't a very good tablet, but it is a very good computer in the form of a tablet, and that is how it has to be respected. So when Apple says this is the tablet that can replace your computer, your laptop, I laugh. When Microsoft says the Surface Pro 6 is a tablet that can replace your laptop, that's an accurate description. I have no other way of putting it. That's accurate. But of course, Apple will continue to press and push and make you believe that this can replace your laptop because, after all, they are charging enough for it to do so. Now, quickly, just looking at the MacBook Air, I'm not going to get too deep, but, here, again, pricing, base of 12, base of 14, and then if, the lowest end model, 1,000, no surprises. You're paying for less. You're paying for less for more than you are with the iPad Pro, because here at least you're getting a processor, an 8th gen Intel CPU. You are getting 8 gigs of RAM. I don't know what you're getting in the the iPad Pro, but so in my opinion, if you had to pick something to be your mobile device, your mobile solution, clearly I would push you in the direction of the 13-inch MacBook Air. But of course, the iPad Pro is all about getting people away from the laptop business, and really it's about making Apple's margins larger. I'm going to repeat that over and over again, because when you look at these, if I were to select this build and bump it up to its top specifications, it does get up to 2600, which is insane. But when you think about the base specs that I've been showing you, not insane, and much better in terms of something I could recommend to you without feeling guilt, because I know that you'll actually be getting something for your money. Whereas the iPad Pro, again, I will reiterate it over and over again, is literally essentially a redesigned previous gen product with, of course, a new Bionic A12X. Don't get me wrong, I don't know how much RAM, I don't know the size of the battery, I know it's got a 10-hour runtime, but that's it. And yes, you have a new pencil. Congratulations. This is only unique to users that are not aware that pen input has been something with tablets and computers forever, and I mean that literally. Apple, even once upon a time, if you can remember that far back, used to be interested in pen input, but they walked away from it, and they've now regurgitated it in the form of the iPad Pro for a new generation. So the MacBook Air, in my opinion, from a design perspective, I do think that, PC manufacturers, this is another thing I was discussing with my close friend, the only company that seems to have picked up the design is Razer, and that's a good thing. I don't want to clone, but from a design perspective, Apple has done a very good job with the MacBook Air since day one. It's just been the pricing that's insane, and well, it still is insane because here we are at $2,600 for a 1.5 terabyte version of this, and that's just a little bit crazy to say the least, especially considering you're still dealing with a Core i5 processor. This isn't even a Core i7, and they can't put a Core i7 in there because of the thermals. It's too thin, and it'll absolutely be throttled to crap. It'll be destroyed. That's basically what it comes down to. And if you're willing to take the dual core, 8th gen core, which I don't know why on earth you would, that's your $1,000 price point. And look, they'll even make this expensive, and this is a piece of junk. Yeah, let's go ahead and boost it up to the i7. Let's boost up that storage. You're spending $1,549. You could be getting nearly a top-of-the-line Surface Pro 6. So this is where the Surface Pro 6 competition really lies, is with the MacBook Air. I actually think what they did with the MacBook Air is more impressive than with the iPad Pro, but the iPad Pro stole the show, and that's because it is a true redesign, but not in terms of functionality and not in a game-changing way, because again, all I see is them replicating what Samsung has started with the entire phone industry, which is let's get rid of the bezel and make it edge-to-edge, and that's what they've done now with their tablets. The Mac Mini, not a lot to say about this. The comparable PC versions, of course, Intel makes their own competing product for this. I think it's cute, but and it does have a place in terms of functionality. This might be the best bang for your buck from the keynote, but again, the fact that there's no i7 version, $800 for the lowest end, $1,099 for this, which is, again, an i5. You can bump it up to the i7, so the thermals do permit, and you can go up to 64 gigs of storage, and you can go up to a 2 terabyte SSD, but yes, this is really $4,099. Now, the cool part is, of course, this can run Final Cut Pro. This can be your everyday computer if you have absolutely no desire to game. So that is very cool, but at $4,099, I can assure you I can find you a better version from Intel that will cost you nowhere near this. Because this is ludicrous. But Apple has never been about making sense. They've been about making money, right or wrong. That's what it's about. And that's why they're the only company that could bring us a tablet at the price of a computer and then actually have the nerve to tell you that it can replace a computer when there's no way in hell it can. Again, for some case uses, there are people that this will replace their laptop. But that is a minority, to say the least. Even if you're an Apple user, I'm going to reiterate that. You're going to want to buy the new MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro. The iPad Pro, it simply isn't going to cut it. It just can't. I don't care what kind of marketing pizzazz and jazz they roll out. The iPad Pro is a refresh. Yes, we got a redesign. We got a new pencil. Yes, the accessories all are additional cost. I have no idea what the charge time is like. I didn't hear anything about utilizing the Type-C port for quick charge, but obviously it should. But then again, as we all know, with the first Google Pixel that came out now almost 3 years ago, quick charge wasn't really there, even though they had Type-C. It was the slowest quick charge on Earth. But at least they included the quick charge cable, unlike Apple, who, if you want quick charge, hand over your wallet or purse. But that's the roundup. So the new iPad Pro gets the buzz. Do I think it deserves all of that buzz? Not necessarily. I like the design. When Apple says there's more in the making, they mean money. That's really what this is all about. Because, again, if they can convince you to spend, $1,500 to $1,900 on a tablet that is still just a tablet and not a computer, and tell you that this is the way of the future, well, they hope it is, because if it continues on this road, they will just continue to make a fortune of money. And that's what this keynote was all about. Cash is king. Greed is good. And I'm not hating on Apple at all. I believe that they changed the landscape. It's just, where is this landscape going? This was another underwhelming keynote, and I should have said that at the top. Refresh is the word. Pricing is absurd. More rhyming, unintentional. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button or don't. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.